Sometimes you need to have people see different things on the same dashboard depending on their role. The conventional way to do this is to use app audiences where you have multiple reports, and depending on the audience, they can see either one report or the other reports. And what that would look like is something like this. Non-managers in this scenario can see this kind of report, and managers can see this kind of report. Pretty cool, similar information, but the managers have a little bit more than the non-managers. But this requires two different reports, as you can see here. And the problem with that is if anything needs to be built or added, you need to build it twice. That can sometimes be a little bit of an annoyance with the amount of maintenance you have to deal with. And a different way to approach this situation is to have everything done in a specific visual. This is the new KPI card. And this is basically just using a specific role in order to identify who the person is and whether they should see these metrics or these other metrics. If you'd like to build this along with me, I will have a starting Power BI report file with all of the measures inside of my GitHub, which you can use to just follow along. This will allow you to be able to make all of the visuals without requiring you to write all of the measures. So one thing that I will mention is that this video is actually using a file that is based around my previous video, how to make these amazing Power BI cards. One of the reasons I'm doing this is because it was just easier for me to, to use this as a base. But because of that, some people who've seen this video might find a little bit of, repetition when I'm going through the different measures. And I apologize, you might want to skip ahead a tiny bit. One thing that I will mention here is that the data model is the same. It's taking my personal LinkedIn data from, it's like taking daily information about how many impressions, engagements, and new followers that I receive on any given day in the last 2 years. It is giving a functionality to allow you to change between the granularity of the data, showing 1 week, 1 month, 3 months, this year. It allows you to look at the moving average line, and this moving average line can show information from the last 3 days, the last 7 days, the last 14 days, based around whatever selection. And of course, it's giving you information, contextual information about what the previous period value was, what's the delta for that value was with the flat difference, and the percentage increase or decrease. Now, while that is all pretty good pieces of information, we will still go through the measures that were used, because these measures are essentially going to just be replicated here in a different format. One of the things that was done with these different values was I used a selected measure, it's a functionality in order to be able to change things very quickly. So you can actually see that here in the original, it's like KPI cards, there is a slicer here in order to allow you to change the card from one metric to another. So it was like kind of it gave the end user the ability to, it's like change and select what metric they wanted on the visual. But since that's not a functionality that we need in order to, it's like build this, a lot of the different measures had to be created without that functionality specifically in order to do this. And the biggest difference between this and the previous version really is the fact that these are multiple different, it's like visuals. So I think this is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different elements, maybe 6 if you include the shape, whereas this is just one visual. So in order to do this, let me just quickly go over the rest of the information. Other than the data table, I have a date table, which was created using Bravo. And basically, it's like with the external tool Bravo, if you just go into manage dates, preview, apply changes, that generally will create an automatic date table for you. I'm not going to go through it so deeply. That date table is connected with, it's like the date column to my data column. There is a couple of tables that I've just input by using the enter data functionality. And using this, I have created a date selection, which is going to be the values that I put in the date selection slicer, indicating 1 week, 1 month, 3 months, etc. There is the measure selection, which was being used inside my previous video to select the actual measure. We're not going to use this today. There is the moving average, which indicates how many days the moving average should reference when, in the calculation. as well as some other things that we'll go through in just a moment. Now, with all of this, the way that this is actually being done, it's like the most of the functionalities is that in the previous, it's like in the previous video, I was using 3 different metrics, the same ones we're using today, which is the sum of new followers, the sum of total engagements, and the sum of total impressions. We have a minimum date and a maximum date, which just gives the minimum and maximum date of the whole data set. And then we have what date is being selected in this date slicer. So is it 3 months? Is it, it's like 1 month, etc. We have a selected minimum date. So this is what I've called it. And I'm not going to go through the logic so deeply, but basically this is indicating, based on this selection, what's the first date that we should use? Is it a week from, it's like today, week before today? Is it a month before today? Is it 3 months before today? What is the actual value that we should be using? And then we have a minimum date pass period. The pass period is here because we want to have this value. What is the, it's like the metric in the previous period, whether it was a month, whether it was a previous week, whether it was previous 3 months, etc. We also have date param. So what is the selected measure date parameter? This is actually where our measures start, because we have the selected measure, and in the selected measure, we want to make sure we only show data between these 2 days that we've identified. And this is the way to do it. And you can kind of see that if you compare this value, this measure, to the first 3 measures that we're using in this video, why we need to make those changes. Instead of using the selected measure, we're using the actual, it's like measure like called out here for new followers, for total engagements and total impressions, so that we're no longer, it's like going around the selected measure, it's like functionality. And that's honestly most of the different measures that we're using. We have, it's like what's the pass period value in over here. So we've got the pass period, exactly the same, it's like values. What is the moving average selection? Indicates what value is being selected in this slicer. Is it 3 days? Is it, it's like 7 days? Is it 14 days? And based around that, we have a moving average, which tries to look at what is the average X. So average for each row in the dates within this period for this measure. And instead of saying for this specific measure, we have that written out as, it's like what's the moving average of that value. And then we have to apply that moving average to the date parameters. So the start and end date based around, it's like the slicer. And then we want to show, it's like this, once again, written out individually here. This one's called DP for date parameter. We've got the date parameter delta, which just shows what's the current period value minus the previous period value, which would give you this flat, it's like value here. What's the percentage difference? That would give you this percentage value here. And then we have a lot of formatting, which is explained much more deeply in, it's like my previous video here. That gives us this whole value as a text that we can put into a reference label. We have the subtitle, which is also a lot of formatting to make sure that we get to this kind of less highlighted previous, it's like period value is this much information. We have a background color and a font color that's being used inside of the reference label to show green when it's positive and red when it's not, as well as, it's like which value is currently being selected. That's not going to be used for us, and a y-axis maximum, which will indicate what is the maximum y-axis inside of a visual, which is actually something we're going to use to make these charts. Now that I've gone and explained all of this, you can actually go and see that everything that I've, it's like just mentioned is just repeated 3 times for each individual measure. And the reason that we're going to do that is because we need to make sure that these first 3 items are inside a field parameter. This field parameter is something that we can create very easily by going to modeling, new parameter, and fields. If you select these 3 different items, you can see that's, it's like the values is here. One thing that I will warn you about is if you try to remove this and you hit enter, it removes the parameter. I don't know why it works this way, but if you hit enter while you have something, it's like selected, instead of accepting the, it's like the new name, if you want to change it here, which you can, it removes the top item because hitting enter removes the field for some odd reason. This is a weird bug. But nevertheless, we want to put in all of these three things. We want to remove the prefix here, and we would name it something else. And I'm not going to do that because that is this measure field parameters that I've already created. And you can actually see that this is the slicer that we are using. Okay, fantastic. After we have these things, we're gonna, it's like basically just start making this. And maybe let's go here and I will just create a new KPI card. This new KPI card is really nice, and we can just throw in, maybe let's close the data. We can just throw in the measure field parameters here, and this will show us the exact data. And because a lot of the functionality has already been built, these two slicers are basically required. I'm going to just leave this in the starter Power BI file so that you can just, just get started with this right here. And once we've created this, we're just going to start, it's like modifying it so that you can see all of the different formatting things that we're doing. Now, before we start the actual formatting aspect, maybe let's go into the actual row level security aspect. So if I am going into modeling, view as, and you see that if I select manager, managers see all three metrics, but if I view as a non-manager, they only see two metrics. How can this happen? This happens because once we've created the field parameters, we actually see that the field parameter is a table. It's a table that looks like this, and because we have total engagements, total impressions, new followers, and a specific order, we can actually assign row level security based around this. So the row level security that I've created here is a very, very simple one. Based around these three measures, the manager has true for all of these items, and the non-manager has only true for the first two measures. Once that table is being created, and there are lots of different ways to do row level security. You can use dynamic, row level security with user principal name, where you can set something based around people's emails and things like that. Lots of different ways to do this. Just really simple one here. You can go to manage roles, and I've created two different roles here, manager, and I've selected the manager. If the manager column, if this, column that you see here is true, and then the non-manager is if the non-manager column here is true. So that looks pretty cool, but that is only half of it. You need to make sure that the row level security filters out these measure field parameters. There is a, more straightforward way to do this where you just don't have the RLS at all, which is that, I guess, inside of the manager role, you could even just go directly to, let's say, the measure field parameter, and then add a value here where the measure field parameter is equal to, for example, total engagement, or is equal to, new followers or something like this, and show data if any of these rules are true. That would work as well, but I think, this is just a different way to do it. Don't save these changes. Okay. And now if I go and I view as a specific person, it would basically be like the same as doing this, where only these two items are selected in this field parameter. That's basically it. But if you do it this way, then a lot of people will probably be thinking about, how do you get all of this? Like when I'm modifying it so that only one measure is showing, how do you change the size of, the visuals so that it looks dynamic? It looks, not like only two items are being cut off. How do you actually get there? And not only that, how do you even have these different values? The secret is that this is just SVG, values, SVG visuals that I'm going to go over in quite a bit of detail at the end because it's quite a bit. Okay, but for now, let's go back here and let's start making the formatting work out for us. So let's go to the visual properties. I'm going to make sure that the background is turned off. I like to make sure that as soon as the background is off, I think let's go to the layout. Single row, cards, 3, this is fine. So if you wanted them to be columns, you could do something like this. We're not going to do that. We're going to make it into a single row like this. Going to go to callout values, which will be these two values here. You can see that if you select the series all, it'll make changes to everything. If you select an individual one, it'll change something for a specific card. I really recommend you to get used to moving around with the series, because this is the key part of the new KPI card. But one thing here is that we're going to make this, let's make this size 20. We want it to be a lot smaller, and we're going to go into label, make this into size 18. Yeah, 18 is fine. We'll make this Segway UI, it's like semi-bold. That's fine. Maybe the values can be 25. Bolded? Sure. That's totally fine by me. You can see that if there's a position below and above value, I like to keep it at the above value. We can change it, it's like around as you like. Okay, maybe here we'll go. This is actually a slight gray, so you can make it completely black if you want. I do like making the labels black. I think it makes them pop out a little bit more. Some UI people have told me that it's not great. What can I say? I much prefer it that way. So this is fine. They're slightly bit different, but it's like pretty similar anyway. Those are the first two things you want people to see. And then we're going to add the other parts here, which is going to be these two things. Now, these two things here are actually going to be just one reference label. But if we go into the reference labels, we have to add labels per series because we're not adding it, the same to every single person. The reference label we're going to add is the period subtitle. So now we have total engagements. So we're going to add the past period subtitle total engagements, which is going to give us a whole bunch of stuff. We don't need all of this. First, we're going to turn off the title, and that's a little bit better. Previous 3 months, 12.20K. That's, it's like very much what we want to show. This is the value here. The value, I'm going to make it into the gray, a slightly grayer color. We're going to make this into Segway UI Light. Oh, I don't know how to pronounce this. Segway UI Light. And then this is very close to what I want. I'm going to turn off. Actually, I'm going to go to select series and I'm going to go to all. And then I'm going to turn the background off, which will make everything white. And the divider, I'm going to make 100% transparent. This is mostly because I don't want the, it's like divider actually to be seen. And this works just fine for me. Okay, so we have this. We're going to go back to the total engagements. And once the value's been, it's like modified, we're going to turn on the detail, go here. And it's a little bit annoying because now you've selected total engagements as a series, but because you've added a reference label, you have to select the reference label, and from there you can add the detail, which is a lot of different steps. And then we're going to go to period, past period, reference label, total engagements, add that there. And that's basically very similar to what this is. Pretty cool, but you can see that it's not, it's like properly formatted yet. So detail is here. And what we're going to do is, let's go to all. We're going to go into the layout and we are going to put it as columns. If you put it as columns, then, it's like it goes one after another. If you put it as rows, then they're side by side. So columns it is. And if we go back to the total engagements, going to the detail, we're going to change the font color here. First, we're going to change the font color into the field value that is being stated here. We do have the reference label background color and the font color. So I believe we're doing background color first. This is total engagements. Oh, sorry, that was font color. So reference label, font color, total engagements. And for this, we're going to click this conditional formatting button, field value, data, reference label, background color, total engagements. Great. Now, this is basically what you need to do for everything else. I might make this a smidge larger. Let's make that 14 because I feel like that is closer to what it looks like there. It doesn't matter super much. So let me just go ahead and do that for these others. So the total impressions is just turning off the title, making the value the same here. Segway UI Light. Okay. Go select the label to be this. Turn on the detail, add the, total impressions data here. Make sure the color is correct. Data font. Okay, so now that everything there is formatted, we can see that some things, it's like gone slightly off because these aren't the same height. That's all right. We're going to go to select all, make sure the divider is on, and then turn it off again. Yeah, sometimes this happens, but I can see that it's because I've changed the size here. So let me just go into the detail for all. Maybe I can change the size here. So I have in fact changed everything to size 15, but it does look like I made some change to total engagements that it was not really willing to accept so easily. That's okay. All right, so let's go to all. We have the divider here. And we can see that even though, it's not perfect, that's totally fine. Did we make, oh, I know what this is. Here, I believe I may have changed this to rows, and then I changed only that one to columns. And now I've changed, everything to columns. So A-okay. Awesome. Now, what else do we need to do? First, okay, so I'm going to make the divider visible for you right now. Once the divider is turned on in the reference labels, we can go to callout values and open the layout and change the callout size. So we're actually going to do this up to like here or something. We're going to click on, it's like the top aspect. I'm going to make this, oh, I want to put it around 19, 20 or something like that, because I think it like puts things together. You can see that the line goes right through the middle of the values. It's a little bit weird, but at the end of the day, we're making the line completely transparent or invisible, so that doesn't matter. Okay, that's great. A lot of information has been, it's like placed in here, and we're pretty close to where we want to be. Now we're gonna go and make the cards a little bit nicer. We'll turn the border. So instead of a shape being a rectangle, I like to use a rounded rectangle. I think the 25 is honestly fine. You can add a shadow if you want, and that's what I've done. It's like to these ones, I think it looks a little bit better. You can also go ahead and mess with padding a little bit. I like to put custom padding, and I like to do what I want to it, which is I like to give the padding to be around 20 for, it's like some of the bigger items. I can make this padding, it's like change as I like. But you can see that if I make the padding too big, then I might have to go back and modify some things like the layout, callout values, the layout. Maybe I want to make this size a little bit bigger so it goes down a bit more. Great. And you can see that, it's like this still works relatively okay. Now, if you wanted to add a couple more different items, this wouldn't be so terrible, it's like, but you can see there's a lot of empty white space, and we're going to try to, it's like fix all of that. Now, if you go down here, a lot of these different things we've already used, and we now need to use this. The chart here that I'm, going to use is basically going to be a really, really big piece of code that is going to generate an SVG for us that will indicate, that will look exactly like this card right here. This is entirely an SVG. It's not perfect, so if you want to modify it, please be my guest. It's, it's like free to use. But this chart, new followers, basically I have a bar color, a line color, and a label color. I have a minimum date that's being used. That's the, it's like selected minimum date. I have a maximum date, so that will be the X, it's like minimum max values. I have the basic dimensions here, which is going to be, it's like what is the number of, it's like dates. And this is actually just to, it's like identify how many bars are going to be inside of the charts. Bar width, how big is the actual number of bars, and that's going to be 130 divided by the count. You can make this dynamic if you want, but it's like more dynamic if you want, but this is basically what I've gone with. X offset and Y offset, that gives us an amount of space this way and that way. Chart height, what's the total height for the bars and the lines? What's the chart width? It's like a chart width is actually calculated. Chart width, height, number of cards, and width. Some of these things are, calculated elsewhere, which you'll see in just a sec. What is the X interval, which is, just take the maximum date and the minimum date, subtract them and divide by 3 to calculate the interval for the X labels and the Y labels. And that means that I want to have 4 labels on the X-axis, maybe 4 or 3 labels on the Y-axis. And then here, this is basically going to be using add columns and summarize to get the number of dates that I want to use, as well as what are the actual data points that I want to use. It's just using the X offset in order to X offset plus a couple different values in order to create data points for the actual chart. So like, where is this point? Where is this point? Where is this point, etc. That is the data points that's going to be used to create the actual SVG code for the bars. And then this is the code that I am using in order to get the points for the lines. And it is a little bit annoying, but you can see that the moving average new followers is, measure is here. But one of the things that's important about this one is that it needs to be ordered by the dates, and if it isn't ordered, it makes a lot of different issues. And then, like those ordered points from, it's like this value is just added, and it's just concatenated into specific points. The data labels are also created here at the end. It's like with the date labels as well as the, it's like y-axis labels. The y-axis labels is actually something I had a lot of trouble with, and I don't know exactly how to do this, it's like better. A lot of this was done with ChatGPT and Gemini. So, you must forgive me that I'm not actually an HTML developer. And then all of these different text values, all of these different variables, which, output some bit of text, are joined together at the very end using SVG, it's like image URL as a variable, and it's just giving that out. And because of the fact we're using so many different variables inside of this, it's like measure, this, it's like image interacts, it's like really nicely, almost the same way as these measures interact with, it's like with just Power BI. So how do we actually put that in here? First, we're going to open up the formatting, go to images. Okay, series, we're going to select a specific series. You can put an image into all, but then they'll also show the same image, which isn't necessarily what you want. Let's go to new image, turn on image URL, and then conditional formatting. We're going to take the data. This is, I believe, okay, this is new followers. So image URL, data, chart, new followers. Okay, now we don't see anything. Don't panic. Position to below text. Make the size not auto, but 800. So here you see that this is maybe a little bit, 800 might be a little bit too big. I am still going to keep it at 800 for a moment. And that's because if I move things around a little bit, that is actually the space that I have designated for this. So 800 is the size. 800 is actually way too big. So if I was to show you, I think 800 would be, okay, shape, size, and style. So it should be a square. So it should be something like this, right? Imagine this as the, amount of space that it has. Like it should be 800 pixels. And the reason that we made this so big is so that when only one item is selected, then it can go this wide. Now we can see that some things, gone a little bit wrong, it's a little awry, and that's completely okay. What we're going to do is we're going to fix add images to everything first, and then we'll sort this out. So go to series, total impressions, turn the image on, image URL, make it total impressions. Was that total impressions? Yes, it was. Below text, size 800, and total engagements, same thing. Now you'll see that, okay, below text 800. And now you'll see that this is something that we do have to fix, and we can go back to the layout. Callout values, layout, and we can actually just modify this here. Callout size, make it a little bit longer, and voila, it's almost perfect. Maybe we can make this a little bit. No, I think this is about it. If you find that you want to make this a little bit neater, you can of course go to the reference labels and make everything slightly smaller. I think this is, it's like a pretty good way to go about, it's like making it, it's like more spacious as well. I think that looks really nice, although that is my personal opinion. Okay, so now that's the case. Let's go and just double check on these different things. We have chart width, height, number of cards, width, it's like, and all of these things are basically saying, what is the number of cards? And that's going to count how many of these field parameters are currently being selected. So how many are actually being shown? Depending on the filter, you can actually, it's like when you have the role, view as, and non-manager, for example, you can actually see that the number of cards is 2. And that's actually how we designate what the size and height should be. So you can see that in the height, we have a switch based around the number 2. So if it's 2 cards showing, then, it's like the height is an arbitrary number that I came to by testing it out a lot of times. The chart width as well as the width of the values. What are these 3 different things? So the height and the width is actually the height and the width of the SVG. So if we go to the, it's like one of these values, you can see at the very end here, the width and the height are basically going into something called a view box. The view box is basically supposed to indicate what is the measurements from the X minimum, the X Y minimum, to the X maximum and the Y maximum. So because of that, we need to indicate what is the height what's the width. And this basically allows us to do this really, it's like cool thing where, it's like if we have one measure or, it's like two measures, then it can, elongate the visual or make it smaller, it's like to fit the actual person who is actually looking at this report. And honestly, that is basically everything. The other charts have the exact same code, only with, it's like moving average total plus the, it's like the actual values for the y-axis max modified, as well as, the total impressions or whatever specific measure you're going for modified. If you wanted to use this for yourself, you basically just needed to, it's like modify what's the minimum, what's the maximum of the X values, what's the maximum of the Y values, what's the measure you want to use. And you might, of course, want to have a data table as well. And of course, this is the moving average total impressions here. So, just make sure you have all of that good stuff in there. All right. So thanks for watching. Hope you learned something new today and take care. So as always, I hope you learned something. Thanks for watching and take care. So as always, I hope you learned something. Thanks for watching and take care.